Oh, good morning, everyone. Um, Today I'm going to be doing some work on kick drums. We're going to be lowering the tempo a bit. Going to be more chill out and electronic. Maybe a bit of a techno influence. You know the score. So that's what I'm going to work on today. I'm going to go through actually synthesizing kick drums using some popular synthesizers. But you can apply all of this, I'd say, to pretty much any synth that you happen to be using, so it shouldn't be any problem at all. We're going to go from complicated synths through to not so complicated synths. Whoops, I dropped that. And as ever, we'll see what happens and get going as best we can once I've got my goddamn phone under control. Okay, excellent. Right, let's start. So the first synth I'm going to use is a synth called Largo, which is not that common, but it's a fantastic synth. It comes with this annoying, weird patch off the bat, but we're not going to be using that, obviously, for a kick drum. Slow the volume a bit there. I'll hit init program, and I get something far more immediately useful. It's a 3 oscillator synth, so you've got oscillator 1, oscillator 2, oscillator 3. I only need one, and I need a sine wave. What I like about this synth for our purposes here is that I can control the phase of the oscillator. And I'm going to put that on 0, and that means that the oscillator will re-trigger from the same point every single time. And I'll get exactly the same attack sound every single time, which is really useful for both bass and kick drums. Any percussive sound where consistency is very important. Less good if you're trying to emulate an analog sounding synth or something like that. Maybe under those circumstances, you want to keep your oscillators free running, and then you get lots of nice beating between the oscillators and give it a really thick sound. Oh, excuse me, breakfast went down the wrong way. The other thing I'm going to do, another nice trick about these oscillators, is that you can control how much they track to the keyboard, whether they work in semitones for each note or whether they work in quarter tones. Or anything at all in between 100% and nothing. Or I think even more than. Yeah, more than 100%. Anyhow, at the moment I want nothing. I don't want the keyboard to track to pitch. I just want to control pitch using this knob here. And then, for the sciencey bit, I need to try and determine what kind of frequency I want my oscillator to be on. And the easiest way of doing that is if I open up a frequency analyzer. So I'll jump down to here. We'll open up Span. This is free. Span is a truly excellent piece of software, which I strongly recommend you go and download. It's from Voxengo. It costs you nothing. It's one of the very, very few spectrum analyzers that I trust. It's certainly a lot better than notoriously Wave's PAS analyzer, which is junk. And I strongly recommend you don't use that because it lies. This one is pretty much accurate. I'm working with a lot of bass frequencies here. So what I suggest you do is you jump over. I'll do it again and be a little bit clearer. You click Edit. You jump over here to block size. It will be on, I think, either 1024 or 2048. Smack that up to at least 16384. It's not particularly important to know exactly what that means. The way I think of it is like focus on a camera, and we want to zoom in on the base of our signal. We don't want to be focusing on the mid range or the top end. We want to be focusing on the bass and get an accurate picture of what's going on in the bass. Especially for me listening through these, which I have to present these to you. Also, frequency low, knock that right down to 1. Frequency high is less important. That's all fine. We might need to play with the overlap, I can't quite remember, but that will do for now. And I'm going to program in a bar of kick drums. Make these. You really want to go longer than a 16th, and remember, note doesn't matter because we've taken that out of the equation. And we'll get this looping. And that's our loop. Now I'm going to be writing chill out today, so I'm actually going to slow that down. I'm not going to decide on tempo yet, but I know I'm not going to be going at 120. But this will work at whatever tempo you want to go at. That's still too fast. I think that's probably still too fast, but I'll give it a go. Okay, so now let's drop this down a long way. That's a lot of bass. I can hear a lot of bass now. Okay, so let's jump into span and see what's happening. And we can see that we have got a pretty clear signal at 40 Hz. Honestly, I'd like to go a little bit lower than that by about another 10 Hz. About there, I'd say. That'll be fine. And what you can also hear is that the start is fine. We get this nice smooth attack. What's happening at the end is there's a big old cut off. So we'll go to our amplifier envelope, and these are all down here on this synth, and we increase the release a bit. So we can't hear that anymore. Perfect. And the next thing we could do, we could change this to about 90 degrees. And you see suddenly we have a nice hard click on the front end of the sound because the attack is on 0, so we get this click, and it almost sounds like a kick drum already. But for now, I'm not going to work that way. I want to be with a nice soft kick, and I'll put in the click later, and I'll do this. I'm going to do sort of 3 different synths, and we'll get the click on each of them differently. So that's the kind of bass frequency I want. What I need to do now is turn this into a kick drum and actually have some kind of kick nature to it. And to do that, I'm going to use oscillator 3 and 4 in conjunction with each other, probably. We'll start with oscillator envelope 3 and 4, not oscillator 3 and 4, sorry. We'll start with envelope 3, and we'll tie that into oscillator 1's pitch controls and use it to create a sweep down over time, which will give us our characteristic kick drum sounds. So that's oscillator 1 pitch I'm sending it to, and I'm sending it from envelope 3. Let's just put that up for now so we can hear what we're doing. You can hear that it can't quite cope with the amount of pitch bend we have going on. But that immediately sounds like a kick drum. Not a great kick drum. You can hear it's a kind of weird phasiness going on at the top end as I move this back and forth over these short times. That's because the oscillator can't deal with the amount of high-end frequencies we're asking it to create, and there's a better way of getting the really, really high-end frequencies in, which we'll do later. So I'm actually going to make a much longer kick sound and reduce this in the synth. I'm trying to get the bass end right. It can take a little bit of time to sort of get exactly where you want it. I'll jump back round to the envelopes. That's starting to sound a bit like an 808. That's the kind of thing I'm after. As you can see, now we're kind of getting a sweep down over time. Down to here. So we never really get down to our 34. If you remember, the peak was at, I believe, 34 hertz is about there. We never really get down to there because the amplitude envelope is in the release stage and it quietens out. So at the moment, we kind of had a sweep really which goes from 100 hertz down to around 50 hertz. And now I can use envelope 4 just a little bit to give it a bit more punch through the mix. So that's going to be envelope 4. Oscillator 1 pitch. I'll get envelope 4 how I want it first as well. It's kind of getting there. Let's have a look in the analyzer. You see now there's a big difference. Big difference. We've got frequencies up to 2 kilohertz strongly and a big old bass boost down here. Let's see if I can get a bit more top end out of it. And there's a kind of squeakiness which I don't like. That's probably about as high as I want to go. I don't think it can handle much higher than that. So now I'm going to try and control the bottom end a bit. I might need to do that with the sustain section. I'm kind of okay with that. I'm going to mute that out and I'm going to move on to another synth. I'm probably going to copy that span across. The next synth I'm going to do this in, I'm going to do this completely differently in. I'm going to do this in, where is it? Diva. And I've already got a demonstration up about this, but we're going to go through it again. I don't actually want any output from the oscillators at all on this synth. I'll stick on multi-core because it's more CPU friendly and that's always a good thing. And also I'll change the sort of filter I'm using and turn it into a cascade filter, which is a little bit easier to work with for this sort of thing. And from here, I'll set both the envelopes to be analog because it gives me more direct control over the decay and release stages, which is particularly relevant for this. So resonance is fully up. I've got analog envelopes. I've got no oscillator sound whatsoever, so I'm completely reliant on the filter itself self-oscillating. And then in trimmers, I want all the way down, VCF reset, that'll be fine. I want the filter to reset every time it releases, so I have the same attack. Again, it's a bit like the phase control. Be aware that it is different when it re-instantiates. So you'll play 8 notes and then it will change. So if you want to bounce it out, this kick drum, I would place at least double the number of notes that you have voices. I'll show you what I mean by that a bit later on. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to copy that MIDI. That's absolutely fine. That's muted out. So, and that's the sound of my synth. Which is pretty weird. I'm going to use this and immediately. So I'll turn up envelope 2 modulation of the cutoff. I'm also going to turn up the accuracy. And I wonder if I can get a bit more sweep out of envelope 2. You never know. I'm going to try and add envelope 2 to itself. And I'm going to make this add. Yeah, perfect. In fact, I'm going to change that again. I'm going to put envelope 2, I'm going to multiply envelope 2 by itself, and then I'm going to add multiply to itself. This is just me playing around with the maths of it slightly to get a different shape. And that's kind of what you get out of Diva. That's a kick drum in Diva. So let's compare them. Kind of plasticky and hard. Much simpler and direct. But much fuller. Not great in every mix. And we're going to try the same thing now in Native Instruments Massive. Just take a second to load. There we go. Again, I'm going to copy the MIDI. Ooh, no you don't. How did that happen? Never mind. Okay, there we go. Solo that. And I want a sine wave again. Now this is a lot more similar to Largo than Diva. We're going to be making this sound using the essentially we're going to be making the sound using the oscillators rather than the filter in this synth. So we're just going to turn them off. You can do more complicated things like make layered kick drums, and that's all fantastic too. Yeah, I think we'll do it that way. And over here you'll see we have key tracking oscillator. We want to turn that off. So now we have the same situation in Largo, in Massive that we did in Largo. Doesn't matter what note we play, it's just this pitch control which is in charge. We'll jump across, so I'll put span in this so we can see what fundamental pitch we're working at. See, I'm way low there. I'll go up a few. And now I can distinctly hear the pitch of the sine wave I'm producing. And again, it's at 35 Hz, so I suspect that these headphones go down to about 35 Hz. And after that, it's just not there. So again, I'll open up the amplitude release. I'll zero out the attack on this. I want, just like in Largo, I want the oscillators to reset, not there, reset every time I play a note, the phase. So it starts in the same place every time I reset a note. And again, just like in Largo, it's got that kind of soft attack. And because I've opened up the envelope, there's no hard click. I like that. I'm not getting a release click. That's going to be about right, I think. So again, it's exactly the same thing. I need to jump over here and I'll need to modulate the pitch of the oscillator with the envelope. So that's much too much for this sort of time sweep. So that's kind of a nice bass sweep. And now I need to get a bit of a click in there, which I'm going to do with oscillator 2. And what you'll note is that I actually can't get anywhere like the same top end out of this synth. One way around that, so you remember we could get sort of up to 10 Hertz. I'm now maxed out on the amount of oscillator 2 modulation I can put in. One way to get around that is to use this trick. But it doesn't seem to work on this synth. At least not as well. So we're going to have to do something a little bit more creative to get the top end that we want. But in some ways, the shape of this kick drum is better. So let's compare them all now. It's kind of real goer kick. And that's quite muted, but it's got a nice body to it. So all of these, with the Diva, I'm going to do a few more copies than I need to. All of these I'm going to bounce down into audio. And then I'm going to work on them further. Oh dear, how do I do that? Transform to audio track. Again, transform to audio track. And transform to audio track. And what you should be able to see is that we got 3 quite different looking kick drums. That's kind of quite a 808 looking kick drum. And these two kind of almost look like they've already been compressed, which they certainly haven't. And I'm going to take one of the kicks. It doesn't really matter, but I would check that you're happy with it first. That's fine. I've got all the top end I want in there. And zoom right the way down into it. And that's why it's got that big old kick. Because it actually almost starts. You can see how aggressively that starts. That's ideal. I don't really need to do anything to that kick drum. That's how it is, I would say. So just use one copy and make that your bar of kicks, if you like. We'll see something quite different, I think, when we look at our Diva kick. And I'm going to go for one of the ones near the end, so the voices have time to reset properly. Make sure you haven't got a fade. And you see, look, this one isn't actually on the beat. And the start is completely different. So let's listen to that. Ooh. I don't think you like that very much. There's kind of like a funny little distortion in that one, so I'm not going to take that copy. I'm going to try this copy instead. It's kind of still there. I wonder if we can edit that out. So, okay, turn off, with one copy of our Diva kick, we're going to do some audio editing to try and get it where we want it to be. I'm going to jump right down to this level. And I'm going to chop out a good chunk of this kick. I just don't need it. Like, that much. Bit too much. But I think you're going to get the idea of what we're up to here. Perfect. I'm happy with that. And then snapping back to grids, we copy that. We make sure that each new copy is in the right place. I'm going to merge them, and then I'm going to oh no, I'm doing that the wrong way around. On all of these parts, I want to do a bit of a fade out. And let's see if that works. I think that's a bit better than it was. I'll merge those events. That's all fine. And then on this one, let's have a look at what we got down here. Again, there's a delay here. See how that kicks late? So we're going to normally the third one. Good. Just for the sound. The sample's fine. Work with one copy, zoom right in. And this one, you remember, we couldn't get the frequency as high. And you can actually see that now. There's a much shorter attack phase on this kick drum than there is in the Diva. We're going to turn off jump about halfway through the first cycle, so we'll turn off snap to grids. Now we'll turn snap to grid back on. And there's our massive kick drum. Together that don't sound so good, hey? And what I think now, listening to all of them together like this, is I don't much like this Diva one. I kind of like the tail end of this massive one, and I like the front end of the one I did in Largo. So I can't remember if I can drag and drop from the sequencer into the DAW. Let's hope. If not, I'll do it on a different synth. No joy. Okay. Oops. Remove track and instrument. We'll do it using the Presonus tool. Impact, I believe, is the one. Perfect. And it was about 200 hertz. So I'm going to make a crossover filter using the filters in this synth, or at least I'm going to try to. We'll see how it works. It may not work at all. There's just no knowing. 1 bar. Bit difficult to see that. I'll make it larger. 1 bar, not 1 beat. Whoops. Only obviously I want them down there. Right, so that should be both of them. And obviously there's a huge amount of bass clash right now. But in this box here I can see roughly where I'm working. I'm going to go to 300, which will allow a bit of slope for both filters to work correctly. This will need to be a high pass filter. Let's have a little look on span, and we should be able to see how effectively we've done that. I'll just copy across the span I've used. Ooh. No, I won't. I've lost it. Of course I've lost it. So we'll set up span again. You can see if anything our filtering's been too aggressive. Not catastrophically, but there's a bit of a gap between 300 and 400 Hz. So we'll go back into impact. Still there. Ooh. Maybe they naturally phase against each other at that point. I'm not too worried. I think it sounds better like that though. That's fine. Kick drum. So let's compare that to the singles. That's much more techno. I'm completely happy with that. Okay, so that's the basic point of making a kick drum done, and you can do that with pretty much any synth. You can either follow the the filter resonance technique there using self-oscillating filters, or you can follow the oscillator technique using Largo or Massive or virtually any modular synthesizer at all. I'm going to delete them out. I don't need them anymore, and I've got the samples in the instrument anyway, so why not? I'll remove them. Remove selected tracks. That leaves just the impact, which is my kick drum synth. And now I'm going to work on a bass sound. So synth. I'll use Largo. So I'll set up a initiation patch. Remember, this is chill out. I'm not trying to write psytrance here or anything crazy. And one of the things I like to do, I actually really like 4/4 chill out. I like doing strange things with velocity. So in this case, I'm actually trying to accent the. No, I don't mean that at all. volume. I'm trying to accent the second and fourth beat of the bar rather than the first and the third, which is probably how people would typically think about a kick drum. People tend to think that, oh, he's going to accent the first and third beat, but no, we're going to accent the second and fourth beat here. Because why not? So let's get a synth going. Yep, we've got Logo open. And for bass, basically I'm going to open an init program. I fancy being in D. You know, I'm not matching the frequency of my kick drum. It was a constantly curving pitch bend, so there is no root frequency. The lowest frequency was about 34 Hz. I don't know what the lowest frequency of D is. I'm just going for D. And I'll make it work. So what you may see a lot of people telling you is that you need to match the pitch of your kick drum to your bass. No, you don't. It can sound great if you do such a thing, but there is absolutely no requirement to do so. None. Having said that, imposing sort of limitations upon what you're trying to do can result in really creative ideas. So if it works for you, then go for it. Okay. Now you should be able to hear there's a kind of instability to the sound. So what we're going to do is just nudge that to 0, and it's now stable. Immediately it's sort of more under control. This is the filter envelope. I'll turn the key tracking on. And I'm going to get rid of that octave jump, that's not helping anything. I'm also going to put in a bass note on the actual beat. Let's get the volume of that right. Okay, so I need to do some work getting these gains nearer the because I want to use a sidechain compressor and I want to make sure the level of my kick and bass are pretty similar, not exactly the same but pretty similar. I need to boost the gain on both of them. For that I'm going to use the mix tool that comes in Studio One, and it essentially is just a gain tool. It allows me to do some bits and pieces. That's a useful one right there, got DC offset, and that is essentially a high pass filter, very, very low down high pass filter. But what I want to do now is I'm going to try and get the peak of the kick drum very near 0. And to save our ears, I'm going to add a bus channel, and I'm going to route both of these into bus 1 and reduce it by about 12 dB, roughly. Nothing too precise, that's fine. And now I'm going to go back in here, and now I'm going to work with this mix tool and get the kick drum. Not the bass yet, but we're going to do exactly the same thing with the bass. we're going to get this kick drum to very near 0. That's fine. And I'm going to do the same thing over here using, I'm not sure which one that was, this mix tool here. Perfect. Now that sounds like garbage. We need to put on a compressor to duct the volume of the bass when the kick drum is present. So on our kick drum channel, we'll go side chains, and now you see why I was getting the volume of the kick drum pretty near 0. I want quite a lot of compression. That's about right. And let's get some EQ on there. So guarding EQ, that's what I'm worried about. I might try some dynamic EQ on that in a minute or two. Not sure about that EQ. Just changing the phase of the oscillator to try and get the sweetest sound I can. Let's see what I can do with the EQ. Also, I made the patch way louder. So this is a dynamic EQ. There's actually a compressor built into this EQ. Let's turn on the analyzer. And now being able to use a shelving EQ to get a control. There's a kind of spitty quality to the front end of the bass which I don't like, but using dynamic EQ and a high shelf, I can dial that right back. And get it under control. Which I don't know about you, I think that's pretty useful. Let's bypass that. Now, of course, it's difficult to judge precisely because I'm on headphones. But what I'm doing here, the things I'm trying, are things that you should definitely have a look at in your own productions. Can be really helpful. But anyhow, that's what I wanted to do today for bass and kick drum synthesis. What does that sound like when it's a lot faster? Well, could that be a psytrance tune? I think it probably could. Let's jump up to about 140. Bearing in mind I've got that weird wobble kick going on. What happens if I make the kick all of the same velocity? I'm pretty sure this will work. I'll duplicate this. I'm going to duplicate everything on this track. I'll mute that out. And there's a weird little double note in there which I hadn't realised. Get rid of that in the official copy too. I'll just mute the mic so I can hear it on my laptop speakers. I think I know what I did wrong. 2 seconds. Okay, the mic's back, that's good. Yeah. That works. May not be the best kick and bass combo you ever heard, but I am working on these. I'm going to get rid of these two because they're not required anymore. I'm just wasting resources. Oh god, another one. Remove track and instrument. Remove track and instrument. Remove track and instrument. And I'll rename this kick and bass. I'll move this channel, this side of the bus, and I'll rename the bus KB group. And that's pretty much that with bass. Another nice thing I like to do with bass is I like to put in a little bit of the old stereo widening carefully. So I'll jump into that now and we'll try and do that. So Guitar Rig 5. There we go. I need a tool. I need a crossover filter. And I need a split in the high section. So the crossover filter divides the low frequency and the high frequency, just like I did when I was making the kick drum. It divides the high and the low frequency, and I'm going to apply an effect to the high frequency, and then I want some dry to come through, some unaffected high frequency, and some affected high frequency. So within the high frequency crossover filter, I've got a crossfader, just like a DJ deck. And in that, I'm going to have a little play with some various different reverbs. And I'm going to start off with something which most people won't think of as a reverb, which is a cabinet. So in split B, I'm going to turn off the amp. You can hear that's having a smearing effect on the audio though. And I want this to be, I reckon, probably around the middle point. The crossover filter is a 6 dB slope. I'll turn it off. The crossover filter is a 6 dB slope, which means it's really, really shallow. So if I have it at about 500 Hertz, the crossover cutoff. At 250 Hertz, an octave lower, it's only half the volume. And again, at 125 Hertz, it's only half the volume again. So all the way down, you have to get to like 30 Hertz before you're talking about 30 dB reduction. So if you make your cutoff at 250 Hertz, which is where the bass is, starting the very top end of bassy sound with body and feel. If you make your crossover there, then by the time you get to 30 Hertz, you're only 24 dB quieter, and it's still clearly audible. So you want this to be pretty high, 500 Hertz higher, I would say, even though you're trying to just affect the bass. And the reason for that is you don't want a stereo signal in your bass. It's a bad plan. So I'll try again now. And I can clearly hear that now. And all of these have a different kind of sound. And which one works is kind of just luck of the draw. That's kind of interesting. So we talked about the most minor of effects, and I'm going to delete that, don't need it at all. The other thing to use is reverb, actual official reverb. Let's try that. I've turned off my amplifier, my cabinet, and in here I'm going to go for small studios. I don't want any dry signal because I'm just dealing with wet signal. And we're getting into the same kind of frequency now. And I prefer what the cabinet's doing, which is almost like a slapback. You can barely hear it, but it definitely improves it. and that is a stereo signal. So as it's a stereo signal, I've got to be really careful. I'm going to go into my mix tool. Oh no, that can't do it. Ignore me. I need something which is gonna... I need to make sure that it works in mono. It's fine. You can even try the same thing on your kick drum. See how that sounds. Not so good. Much harder to set up. Maybe just the tiniest little bit. Well, I'm not convinced even by that. We'll get rid of that. Almost just sounds like distortion on the top end. And if you're going to distort your kick drum, you want to be distorting the bottom end to make that bang out, rather than the top end, which can be a bit crunchy. Well, I suppose you can. You could do it the other way around, have a clean bottom and a banging top end. Don't know. Ah, it's fallen off the sidechain. Even tidier. Maybe a touch too much. About there. Okay, that's everything I wanted to do with kick and bass today. So I'm going to leave that there. As I say, I was trying to write chill out, but it just turned into 140 BPM. Chugging. I'm going to take a little break and then we're going to come back and I'm actually going to start writing a tune. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it all.